40 female. Am a single mother of 3 children. Naomi, 14 female. Porter, 19 male. And my oldest son Nathan, 23 male. My husband died from an overdose in 2013, and I have been trying my hardest to support my family. I was fired from my retail job back in February of 2016 for pocketing money from the cashier, and I was caught after a coworker who had seen me told my boss, and he checked the security cameras and had confirmed it. Little did I know the same day would take a dark turn from there as I got a call from my son Porter while I was driving my way home, which when I picked up my phone, I heard police sirens in the background and a lot of crying from what sounded like my daughter Naomi. He had told me that Nathan had disappeared after Porter had heard a loud thud from Nathan's room, and his phone went straight to voicemail when he called him. I called Nathan to confirm his suspicion that his phone had in fact went to voicemail. My heart was racing as I was driving home with a terrible snowstorm in my point of view. About 7 minutes later, I arrive home to see Naomi and Porter both next to each other. Naomi was crying uncontrollably, as Porter was trying to make her stop crying as hard as she was. I talked to the police about it, and they had told me that they would update me if they had any lead on the case. But for a while they had told me nothing. About 1 hour later, an active shooting and kidnapping alert was issued near my home, and it made me more anxious. About a day later, the kidnapper and shooter were arrested, and all the victims were identified and put back into custody. But my son was not one of the victims, as I never got a call about him from the local police station. And when I asked them, they had told me they had not gotten new information on him. For a while, I was deeply depressed. I could not land a job that would cover enough money for bills and to support my children, and it was just overall hell for my collapsing family. Fast forward to around 2019, and I was getting back on my feet. I had a new husband to help support my family and pay the bills when I was unable to. And I had gotten a job after searching for a while, and life was starting to look up. That was until COVID struck. I had to work at home and my kids were temporarily put on virtual learning, and it was definitely hard to manage the family during 2020 through mid-2021. 2022 was a year that really fucked with me mentally. I had seen Nathan in places as if he had grown and nothing ever happened. But as soon as I would look away, he would disappear. It was keeping me up at night for a while, so eventually I took therapy for around 4 months, as there was nothing else I could have done. But more throughout the year up until late 2022, I would see Nathan. But he would do something new each time. Sometimes he would talk to someone. Sometimes he would be reading something or looking at something. One day, though, Nathan walked up to me, but he looked like a poor mimic of him, and he was slowly deteriorating as he was approaching me. But the thing I will never forget is what he had said to me. "I am sorry," he said to me as he was flaking away. It was a hallucination of some sort, but a really real lucid feeling one. It was too real for me. I told my husband about this. He had told me that he was really worried for my mental health and that I need to seek therapy again. I took therapy again. It helped, but it was not enough. I still felt as if he was out there. Then yesterday happened. The police contacted me and said they had found Nathan. I was shocked. He was still alive. It was so much for me to process. I head over to the station to see where he was, but the person they had thought was my son was nearly a terrible copy of him. It looked nothing like him. He did not even look human. My daughter even told me this, and she was too scared to interact with him. I had let my gullibility get the best of me, however, and I let him come home with us. That would turn out to be a terrible mistake. Later in the day, I was watching TV and heard him from his room. It sounded like faint screams at first, so I was worried. But as soon as I entered his room, my heart dropped, and I could not believe my eyes. That thing was not him. Remember how I said earlier in my hallucination that he was deteriorating? Well, this was nearly the same thing. It was peeling off layer by layer. But now there was blood bleeding from everywhere, and it looked like his limbs were growing rapidly and he was getting skinnier. His voice got more distorted too, as if someone had reversed his speech and he was screaming what sounded like gibberish. Around the 7th layer of skin, it looked completely empty. Nothing like I had ever seen before. It was tall and void-like, and was way too skinny to be a normal person. This was not my son. Not too long after, it had looked like he was growing vines around the room from his feet. I did not want to enter the room. In fact, I was pretty much paralyzed. He glanced over to see me. He had no mouth but was still able to talk, and he said the same thing I had heard in my hallucination. But this time it sounded like its voice was like a broken record. as it repeated randomly and the voice was hard to kind of tell what it was saying. I call the police, they arrive and investigate the room, but the entity had left with its only trace being the skin that had peeled off. I am writing this in fear of it coming back and hurting my family or much worse. My husband is terrified with all of this, and the kids are extremely fearful of what they had just been through. And I can't say this more than enough, but I am also just as fearful of what could happen next.
Growing up in the vibrant city of Toronto, I had often heard the chilling tales surrounding Ravenbrook Manor. The stories spoke of a family consumed by greed, dabbling in dark magic, and committing unspeakable acts. As the years went by, the manor was left abandoned, its windows shattered, and its halls echoing with the ghosts of its sinister past. So, when my friends and I found ourselves with a dare to spend a night in the forsaken mansion, my curiosity overpowered my apprehension. It was a crisp autumn evening when we ventured into the woods, guided by the moon's pale glow. Armed with flashlights and nervous laughter, we joked about our bravado while our steps grew hesitant as we approached the decaying structure. The air seemed to grow colder, and the rustling leaves created an unsettling symphony around us. We cautiously entered the mansion, our footsteps echoing through its halls. The flickering of our flashlights cast eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper and cracked mirrors. The place felt like a time capsule, frozen in a moment of dark history. The atmosphere was undeniably heavy, but we reassured ourselves that it was just our imagination playing tricks. In the grand ballroom, the air became dense, and I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. My flashlight flickered momentarily, casting eerie silhouettes on the walls. We laughed nervously, attributing it to old wiring. But then, whispers began to emerge from the walls, faint at first, like distant echoes. My heart raced as the whispers grew clearer, forming chilling phrases that seemed to be coming from every corner. "You cannot escape what dwells within these walls," the whispers coalesced, sending a wave of unease through our group. The bravado we had displayed earlier faded, replaced by a growing sense of dread. But we pressed on, convincing ourselves it was just some elaborate prank orchestrated by my friends. As we moved through the mansion, doors creaked open on their own, and the temperature dropped even further. Shadows danced at the edge of our vision, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Our laughter had ceased, replaced by tense silence, broken only by the occasional nervous chuckle. The climax came in the form of a hidden chamber we stumbled upon in the basement. The air was thick with a malevolent energy as a figure materialized before us. It was a ghastly apparition, a manifestation of the Ravenbrook patriarch. My heart raced as I stared into the spectral eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. With a shock, reality shifted. The room twisted and warped, walls bleeding with gruesome images, and the figure's voice echoed in a dissonant chorus. I stumbled back in disbelief as the very fabric of the world seemed to unravel. My friends' terrified faces mirrored my own as we found ourselves in a nightmare realm, trapped between the ethereal and the corporeal. Then, just as suddenly, the distorted reality snapped back. The room returned to its decrepit state, the figure dissipating into the shadows. The whispers ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that felt even more unsettling. As dawn broke, we fled the mansion, breathless and shaken to our cores. The events of that night left me scarred, haunted by the unreal horrors I had witnessed. To this day, the mere mention of Ravenbrook Manor sends shivers down my spine, and I'm left questioning the thin line between reality and the unimaginable. I recently moved in with my GF Ellie in Quebec, Canada. We lived in a small neighborhood surrounded by dense forest. I had a well-paying job and had saved enough to where I could retire right then and there. We had small shed out back. It was run down and falling apart, so hearing it shake in the wind was often, but never the sound of its metal being pounded on and ripped. What followed sounded like deep guttural roar. I woke up Ellie and walked with her to the shed. What we saw wasn't made by any human. A 12-foot hole in the metal of the door and blood everywhere inside lay a dead elk carcass. We didn't know how its body was twisted and contorted to the shape it was. Was Ellie puked at one look after we reported the incident, life seemed to return to normal. After a week of the investigations into what happened, I went to go buy some things, but it was an hour drive to the nearest store. 10 minutes into the drive, I saw it a malformed body with the head of Ellie. It stood on a hill with a horse's legs, a human body, and 8 arms, 4 on each side. It looked like her with horns. Honestly, I was shocked, especially since it was running side by side a car going 65. I pressed on the gas and sped out. It maintained a constant side by side with my car going 140 until it rammed into my car and was thrown off. I quickly turned around and went home. What I found horrified me. My house torn to bits along with my neighbors, my GF. My neighbors are all dead. It's been 8 years and I'm still running. I found its top speed is 160, and it reacts violently to any vinegar. Its eyes react to bleach or intense light. And its bones can't be destroyed. Its regeneration is about 1 limb an hour. If I drive more than 1 state away, it takes it about 2x weeks to find me. I keep it a constant to move every 7 days. I mostly stay in motels I find and live off of what I had saved. And since I had been living pretty cheap, I still had over 90% of my saving left. I only made contact with it once through a radio broadcast I had picked up on my car's radio. All it said was, "You're not like the others, you don't play around." That was 2 hours ago, and I'm hiding from it in the woods. I hear its heavy feet breaking every twig, and it's agonizing hearing its feet approaching me.